Denial is a powerful, powerful thing. We would rather, not peer into those parts of ourselves that are so deeply troublesome. But that's where the healing is. And by the way, in my experience, that's where you are most likely to bump into God, is in the point of pain in your heart.
Well, hey, friends, welcome to the Found Podcast. Welcome if you're new. Welcome back if you've been hanging out a while. My name's Lorie, and I'm delighted to have you here. I'm a little fangirl today because one of my favorite, I would say, podcasters, authors is on the show today, Ian Morgan Cron. Some of you are going, what? That guy from Typology, from the book, The Road Back to You? Yep. Ian Morgan Cron himself is here. He's the Enneagram expert. That Typology podcast, by the way, there's probably more than 28 million downloads. That's the last number I have. The Road Back to You has sold millions of copies. It's helping so many people become self-aware through the lens of the Enneagram. I might have to tell Ian what Enneagram number I am. He might already know. But we're going to hear from Ian today. We're going to talk about his newest book, which is called The Fix, how the 12 steps offer a surprising path of transformation for the, catch this, well-adjusted, maybe that's you, the down and out, maybe that's you, and everyone in between. So that includes all of us. Here is this amazing book, The Fix. I couldn't put it down. I gave it to my husband. I'm passing it out to my friends. Okay. So if this sounds like something that you might need, well, you're going to hear directly from Ian today. Ian, welcome to the Found Podcast.
Lorie, I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well, we met I'm going to say weeks, maybe it was a few months back ago on the Perspective TV show. And you were so gracious to join me on my own Found podcast. So thank you so much. I'm going to call you my friend now. I feel like I know you already. How's that?
You please call me your friend. And I'm so happy to be back with you now.
Well, Ian, is this too much of a test to ask the typology expert? What Enneagram number do you think I am?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's very hard to say because, though we're friends, we're new friends. And, the Enneagram is all about not traits per se, though they can be a hint. It's about the hidden motivations that drive behavior. And since you're not made of glass, I can't see inside you. But I'll make a guess. How about if I make a guess?
Okay, make a guess.
You are either I'm going to make a couple of guesses. How's that? I would say you're a 2, a 7, or a 9.
Well, bingo, my friend. I land in the 7 category. That would be my motivation. Clearly, I just want to have fun. But I have a lot of 9 in me. And a lot of 3 in me. So that's sort of my triangle. So that if that explains a little bit of who I am. And people listening, if you don't know the Enneagram, Ian, can you just tell us just briefly, what is it? Because it has been a valuable tool in my own life to understanding myself better. It's been a valuable tool for me understanding the people that I love better. It's helped me in relationships. It's helped me at work. Even our staff at our church, we used it as a helpful tool to actually enable our team to understand each other better. So I want to thank you for it first and foremost. But tell us just quickly, what is it?
Thanks. The Enneagram is a personality typing system, and it teaches that there are 9 basic personality styles in the world. One of which we gravitate toward and adopt in childhood as a way to cope, to feel safe, and to, navigate the new world of relationships in which we find ourselves. And the Enneagram doesn't just tell you what you do, right? It doesn't just describe predictable behaviors. It tells you why you do it, right? It surfaces the unconscious motivations and drivers that influence how we show up in the world. And in that respect, it's unique and it's very, very useful, whether you're on a church staff, a corporate team, in marriage, as parents, as friends, in every domain of life. It's super, super helpful.
It is very helpful. Now, like any tool, it can be used for good or for weaponry. And unfortunately, sometimes we just like to label other people and say, well, that's who they are, put them in the box. And I feel like I've been a teacher for many years. So I love all the tools, personality tools. I think it gives us greater understanding, but how can it be used for good and then not so good in our life?
Yeah, I always tell teams that I work with in companies, which is where a lot of my work is, right? I just tell them, number one, the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. It tells you about the box you're already in and how to get out of it, right?
Yes.
So it's not about labeling people. The other thing is that your personality is part of who you are. It's not who you are. It's part of who you are, right? Yeah. So it's, I'm very careful about ever giving people the impression that I'm trying to, hedge them in, put them in, a category that they can't get out of. That's not true. Now, where it can be really unhelpful is when people use their Enneagram type as an excuse for poor behavior. So it's like when someone will say something to me like, well, I'm just an 8, you got to deal with me. And I'm like, okay, that is a misuse of the Enneagram, right? The Enneagram will reveal not only, it's going to reveal that what's best about you is what's worst about you, and what's worst about you is what's best about you. Mm. And once we know our Enneagram type, we have hopefully we feel a responsibility and an obligation to work on those parts of our personality that are not landing well with others in our life, right? So, like you said, you can misuse anything that's intended for good. And I'm just always having to remind people of the best ways to use the Enneagram.
Yeah, that's so good, Ian. And your work is wonderful. It's helping so many. The Road Back to You, obviously, is still selling millions. I mean, it's sold over 1 million copies. Hopefully there's more millions coming in there. And now you've written this book called The Fix. Now, this book is really a powerful tool. It comes with a workbook, which we'll get to. But I want, because you're like this personality expert, you have a lot of insight into why people do what they do. But actually, you have your own story. So, Ian, I want you to share your own story with us. Because John Maxwell, this guy I used to work for, which I just love. I love John. He says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And Ian, you care about people. You're very compassionate, and you care about people's stories. So we want to hear your story, Ian. Take us back to your childhood, this difficult childhood that you share about, and how it shaped you, how it shaped your personality, how it shaped your ideas about yourself, your identity, your belief systems, how it shaped your view of God and others. So would you just take us back and tell us a bit of your story?
Yeah, I was raised in a very troubled home. I was raised outside of New York City in this very Irish Catholic family. My father was a chronic alcoholic, died of alcoholism at 60 years old, never really saw a day of sobriety in his life. As you can imagine, that was very chaotic, unpredictable. It was a scary place. My dad was not a kind person. And it was a rocky road. And I have my own journey of recovery in addiction. I have siblings who do. We oftentimes say that addictions don't run in my family; they gallop. It's something that is just a part of our family story. And I first entered the rooms of recovery in 1987. So this is going back a minute, right? And the 12 steps, which of course the Fix is largely about, have featured largely in my life story. Just to maybe finish up on the question though. I'm 64 now, and I've done a lot of work. I've done some good things and I've had some misadventures. That's life, right? And I heard someone say something the other day that I found profoundly moving. They said, a day will come when you will love the thing you wish had not happened to you. And I was thinking about my childhood and how I grew up and how many years I spent wishing it hadn't happened. And I've come at my age now to love it because of who it made me, how it shaped me, how it enabled me to do what I do the way that I do it. And I feel very, very blessed, very fortunate that I had many good people along life's way who were very kind and very wise, who helped me understand how God, whatever you want to choose to call it, can use these circumstances and life experiences to make you even more useful and purposeful. So I'm glad to report I feel good. I just feel so fortunate. I've got a beautiful wife and 3 great kids, and I've had a life and continue to live a life that's infinitely better than I ever dreamed.
You know, that is such a beautiful statement. I know that I'm getting ahead of this, but I know from your book, one of the 12 steps takes you through this process of making a list of your resentments. And when you said that, I thought, oh, wow, like talk about healing from all this list of things you resented about your past or the people or the pain, the things that were done to you. And it's true. I mean, you know, our faith is in God. We believe in the work of Christ. And we know that that is where we can find our healing. And as a person of faith, as you reflect on your story, what was your view of God as a young boy in this trauma, in this trouble?
You know, it's so curious because as I mentioned earlier, I was raised in the Catholic Church. That's where I came to faith, I believe. And I would say that my young Ian self was very attuned and very drawn to God. That even in the midst of so much chaos, I felt God's friendship. I felt God's presence in a way that was consoling. Now, I've had seasons of anger. I've had seasons of disappointment. And I've had seasons of, listen, my relationship with God is not unlike my marriage. My marriage, I've had multiple marriages with the same woman. And so, that's just how marriage goes after 40 years, right? And you look back and you realize, oh, we've had several marriages. And I've had several relationships with God. And that's just normal. That's just part of the pattern of when you're close to somebody, you have different seasons. And some are challenging, some are smooth sailing, some are beautiful, some are terrible. And the good news is that God's in it for the ride, the whole thing. That's been a good part of it.
Well, it certainly is one of the main messages in the fix, isn't it? These 12 steps, which we're going to unpack in a minute. But you shared very openly about what you call your 30-year recovery journey. Tell us a little bit about what led you to addiction. Like, what did it look like for you? What was this addiction story for you? And what did the road to healing look like for you? Yeah, well, listen, the other day someone said, and I might have mentioned this on your other show. I recently had someone say to me, I'm glad you wrote this book because my brother Bob has a drinking problem. And I said, actually, Bob doesn't have a drinking problem. Bob has a drinking solution. Yeah. So, you see, drinking or whatever your fix is, right? Whether it's drinking or food or sex or porn or sports betting or workaholism, in case the list goes on and on and on. That's not the problem. That's a symptom of the problem, right? It's in the mind of the person who's using that fix, right? It's a solution, not a problem.
Now, it's a misguided solution, but a solution nonetheless. Now, what happens in things like addictions and things like that is we're trying to solve an internal problem with an external thing. And then eventually the external thing becomes a bigger problem than the problem it was trying to solve. Yeah. Now you got two problems. In fact, you've got more than two problems. You've got those two problems and the fallout of those two problems, right? So, I mean, for me, so much of, first of all, I was raised in a home where heavy drinking was just part of the landscape, right? I was raised by people who were modeling for us precisely how not to deal with pain, right? And so, I carried that with me. I carried that message with me. I lived that message. I think part of these things is trauma. I think part of addictions is, genetics. I think part of it is, I think it's very complicated. I don't think you can point to one thing and say, oh, that's the cause, Yeah. I just felt like, I feel like it was a understandable way of coping that didn't work. And I was fortunate that I found my way out.
Well, I think that's so clarifying. And actually, in the title of the fix, it's for the well-adjusted, the down and out, and everyone in between. It's like, what's your drug of choice, right?
Right.
What is our drug of choice? And really, it's because we're all trying to either mask or deal with pain or shame. Tell us more about that, because someone's listening going, what? Like, I thought I had a, porn or a drinking or a drug problem or a relationship problem. Tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, you could, people say to me all the time, well, I don't really need to read this book because I'm not an addict or an alcoholic, right? So that's just because we have stereotypes in our mind about who needs the 12 steps. The fact of the matter is, let's just say you're listening and you're like, I'm not an addict or an alcoholic, so this isn't for me. I'm just going to tell you, look, I'm not going to try and convince you. However, number one, I believe all of us look for external fixes to internal problems all the time. They're called idols. And I dare anybody to tell me they don't have any.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So let's just start there right now. But let's say you continue to argue with me. I just say, look, do you want to have a better life? Do you want to feel more free, more connected with God, yourself, and others? Then work the 12 steps. They're for everybody. Yeah. They're not just for people who identify as addicts or alcoholics. They're for you.
Yeah.
And so I can't commend them enough, because when you think about how many millions of lives they've impacted, and the mind-boggling transformation that people have experienced as a result of working the steps, and then you realize that could be anybody. I mean, come on, let's spread the word about them.
Right, exactly. Tell us the history of the 12 steps, because someone listening might go, okay, what AA, Alcoholic Anonymous 12, is that, are you talking about the same thing? Is this something different? What's the history of the 12 steps that we're talking about here?
So going back to the 1930s, Bill Wilson, who was the principal author of the 12 steps, was a hopeless alcoholic as a result of an interaction with a Christian organization called the Oxford Group. He wrote the 12 steps, so they're derived from a Christian organization. There's not one of them that if you were to read, you wouldn't think to yourself, well, that's the gospel. I mean, it's just, in many ways, the gospel simplified and spelled out as a way of life. The 12 steps since then have now been the organizing principle, if you will, in hundreds of 12-step communities, right? So there's not just Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. There's Overeaters Anonymous. There's Gamblers Anonymous. There's, Workaholic Anonymous. There's tons of them. And it's just incredible the difference they make in people's lives.
Yeah. How did they help you?
Well, in many ways, right? I think underneath all addictions or idolatrous relationships, there is broken relationships. It's a way of coping with broken relationship with God, with self, and with others. And the steps address those broken relationships, right? In steps 1 to 3, we're going to mend and deepen our relationship with God. 4 through 7, it's just about mending and deepening your relationship with yourself. 8 and 9, with other people. And then 10 through 12 is, how do I keep going? How do I keep doing this? How do I keep living this pattern of life? And so it's kind of, everything's in the box right there, right? It's like, it's a fully formed design for living or spiritual technology.
Mm-hmm. And as you coach people, and even in your own experience, what was the breakthrough moment that you see for people? Like, does it happen at step 1, step 2, step 5?
Yeah. Well, this is very interesting because people sometimes think that the 12 steps are a self-help program, and they are not. They are not. It's not a self-help deal. People, and I always laugh because I'm always like, listen, if yourself could have helped yourself, wouldn't yourself have done it already? Right? That doesn't make any sense, right? The stated purpose of the 12 steps is to facilitate a spiritual awakening of sufficient force that it expels your need for any addiction, fix, and you find that in your relationship with God, that it just renders that desire unnecessary, right? Like it just becomes unnecessary for you because you've solved the problem, right? You've now solved the problem. And therefore this other old solution just doesn't make sense anymore. It's just gone. Now, in terms of the aha moments and steps, it's different for different people. For some, it's step 1. We admitted we were powerless over blank, that our lives had become unmanageable. Insert your fix of choice, right? And for some people, just the admission that I'm powerless opened the door to this relationship with God, right? It's like, I'm out of ammo here, God. And then there's this sudden weight that's lifted off your shoulders. And you're like, it's going to be okay. Like, I can stop all this crazy trying to control something that is out of control, right?
Right.
For many people, it's steps 4 and 5, right? 4 is made a searching and moral, fearless inventory of ourselves. And 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. And many people, they do that 4th step. They come up with all this material. They go and they share it boldly with another person. I mean, everything. You leave nothing out. If you have sexual abuse in your history and you've never spoken about it, it's got to come out in that 5th step with somebody, right? Like if you've got whatever has happened back there, as my sponsor used to say, Ian, not everybody needs to know everything about you, but one person does. Mm-hmm. And I just think about in the New Testament, there's a great passage in James. Confess your sins to each other and you shall be healed, right? And confessing sins isn't just what you've done, but what's been done against you.
Yeah.
Right? So, and many people come out of that 5th step feeling 1,000,000 pounds lighter. They've been seen, they've been heard by a compassionate, caring other. No shame. All the shame feels gone, actually, because you're no longer carrying the burden of secrets. Right? And that's a big step.
It's a big step. But can I be honest? Most of us can't even get to step 1 because we actually like living in denial.
Yeah.
Talk to us about why is that? Why do we love to live in denial? I mean, I know I'm making a blanket statement here when I point to a generation, but older generations often were very pragmatic. Some of it was they came through the war. They had to every day was about getting food and shelter and surviving. So there's some of that, even in the context of where and when you grow up. But there also was this sort of, well, we don't need to talk about the past. What good will it do? What good will it do if we bring it up? Like, do you know what I'm saying? And I find then it just keeps us in denial. So I'm not saying that can happen in every generation, by the way. What is the power of denial over us?
Yeah. But I think back when you were just speaking about that, about my parents. My mom died last year. She was 95 years old. You know, I feel bad for my dad because he grew up in a generation where, unfortunately, that was the rule.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it. Don't share your problems. Don't look inside. Don't do the work. My mom didn't have access to support groups for people married to, alcoholics. She never went to therapy. She didn't think, my mom was embarrassed to know if one of her children went to therapy, right? You don't talk about your problems. This was like forbidden. And of course, I look at their lives and I feel bad because I don't think they had the fullness of life they could have had they had opportunity to do the kind of work I've done, right? Denial is a powerful, powerful thing. One of my friends defines it as the refusal to know what you know. So at some level, you do know, right? Like, you can deny, like, let's say you're in an unhappy marriage and you've been in an unhappy marriage for 30 years. You know you're in an unhappy marriage, but you're refusing to know it at the same time. You're refusing to do anything about it. You're just in denial. You're sad, you may be a little depressed, you're anxious, whatever it is, but you just don't want to attribute it to what it's about and deal with it, right? And that's a sad place to be. Human beings have a wild, talent for self-deception. It's as a therapist, I can just tell you, I'm amazed. And I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in other lives. We would rather, not peer into those parts of ourselves that are so deeply troublesome. But that's where the healing is. Yeah. And by the way, in my experience, that's where you are most likely to bump into God, is in the point of pain in your heart. And so if you want a deeper intimacy with God, you enter into the truth about your life, and there he will be.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, doesn't Scripture remind us in many instances that when we come to the end of ourselves, when we recognize our actually need for a savior, a need for saving, a crying out for help, that's when we can actually receive the help that's there. But until we will cry out for help, God's a gentleman. He doesn't push his way into our life, but he's ready and available. Step one in the fix, the 12 steps as well, is about admitting we're powerless, right? So why is that such a crucial step, as you say?
Oh, because it's the truth.
It breaks you out of denial.
Yeah, look, people tend to think they have far more power in their lives and control than they actually do. Okay. Right. I always, in the fix, I talk about this thing. I said, I don't know why people think they are in control. Most people can't sneeze without wetting themselves. What makes us think we have control over people, places, and things? We can't even keep our bladder in check. Right. And so, now powerlessness doesn't mean helpless. It just means you don't have power over you definitely don't have power over your addictions. Otherwise they wouldn't be addictions, right? You most definitely don't have power, though, really over people, places, and things. You have influence. You have freedom. But you don't have the power to, make anybody do, believe, feel anything, right? Like our power is far more limited than we would like to admit. But once we do, it opens up a space for God's power to come in. And then suddenly you're no longer playing God in your life and in the lives of others. And there's a great relief and joy that comes with that. But often step one comes on the heels of humiliation, because you have run into something that is so much bigger than you, that it's going to require a savior to get you out.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love the story of Bill Wilson and just his vulnerability in sharing. He just was a wreck. Like, he actually just came to a wreck in his life and had to admit his needing of help. And it's a supernatural story of God's intervention and deliverance, isn't it? It's just such a powerful story.
It's mind-boggling.
It really is. And that story can be true of us. Like, God is powerful enough to save us, isn't he, Ian? To save us from ourselves.
Yeah. Listen, you're preaching to the choir now. I mean, it's his story. Bill Wilson's story is amazing. But I got to tell you, I do go to 12-step meetings every week. Was at one last night. I'll be at another one tonight. Not because I have to, not because I'm sitting around thinking about doing something I shouldn't be doing. It's because I love them. They're fun, and I find them really enjoyable and helpful. I get to see my friends, and we get to share stories. And these are and they're friends from, places in the world that I would never have met them anywhere else, right? So it's very rich, right? What's amazing to me is how many millions of lives have been equally transformed by working the 12 steps as Bill W.'s was. I've seen miracle upon miracle upon miracle in my own family, in the lives of friends, and it's available to all of us, right? Working the steps is for everybody. It's not just for those people, quote unquote. It's for all of us, and that's just what this book is about. It's like, hey, everybody, you too can have a better life than the one you're having right now, and the steps would get you there.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the podcast. If you like what you're experiencing so far, would you like, share, follow, subscribe, all this stuff, because this helps more people be part of this journey with us. And now we have an opportunity for you to be able to actually donate to this ministry. Lorie Hartshorn Ministries is officially a charity. So go to loriehartshorn.com/donate and join us today so we can share the message of Found with more people. Now back to the conversation. Tell us one of those miracle stories, whether it's yours or someone in your family or friend.
Man, boy. Well,
I know there's many to pick from.
Oh man, there's so many to pick from. Well, I'll tell you a personal story. So I have one of my children is in recovery, and we went through 3 rounds of treatment and 4 or 5 real hard years. And I was just journaling this morning in my sort of quiet spiritual time in the morning. And this is not the first time I've written this. He called, this is so funny. He called yesterday to tell us that he thinks he's lactose intolerant. Okay. Now you might think to yourself, what's so funny about that? Well, do you know that 5 years ago, every time his name came up on a screen, we shuddered, wondering what was wrong, right? Like he was just in trouble, And so seeing his name come up and sometimes he'd call and he'd need money, or it would be this or it would be that, he was in the throes of addiction. And now he calls to tell us he's lactose intolerant. And my wife and I laughed our heads off. I'm like, this is a miracle. He calls to say he's lactose intolerant. That is the best news I have ever heard. And then he called me again yesterday to tell me about an upcoming job interview and all the wonderful things that he's doing. And I'm like, that's a miracle right there. Yeah. That's a miracle. I've seen that kid, his life be so utterly transformed by working the steps. And
that's beautiful.
So I'm not only, this is not a theory to me. This is not an abstract theological idea. This is something I've lived and have seen firsthand.
That's right. That's right. Well, step 2 talks about a power greater than ourselves, restoring us to sanity. Yeah. So is the inference that we're actually all insane at some level? You share in your story in the book about how your view of God shifted in that process, in that step. You realized you were a bit insane in your view of God. Is that what it was?
Yeah. I mean, look, we all are kind of insane, aren't we? I mean, look, if we go by the old, it's a little tired, but it's tired because it's true, right? That insanity is repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I don't know anyone who doesn't do that. Like, I don't know. I'm a priest and a therapist. I mean, I get it from all sides. People do stuff over and over again, expecting different results. They're batty, right? We do things all the time that surprise us, right? And not always in the most pleasant ways, right? Anyone who's just even taken a mild momentary glimpse inside should come away going, wow, there's a lot of contradictions happening inside me, right?
Right.
So I do think that we're all a little kooky. And, I'm not saying, that there aren't people who are, there are clearly people out in the world who are, mentally ill, and that's a whole different dimension. But all of us are, for the most part, garden variety neurotics, right? Mm-hmm. It's just how it is. Now, what the second step gives us is hope. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And we could actually use the word wholeness there. If you don't want to go with insane, sane, you can run with from broken to whole, right? That there is a God that loves us and cares about us. And you need to know that right after step one, because there you've admitted powerlessness and the idea that your life is unmanageable. So now the second step is, yes, you're in trouble. However, there's good news. There's someone who can restore you.
Yeah. When my kids, I think I shared a little bit of our story when I interviewed you on the perspective, but 3 kids, and we'll just say 3 prodigal kids. And we thought we were good parents. And at some point we thought, oh man, we've really screwed up here.
Yeah.
Clearly we failed, right?
I know this. I know that story.
Do you know that story? And, as your kids are running, and then this identity of I'm now the bad mom, I'm the bad parent, and this is somehow all my responsibility. And yet what I've learned in that journey, which is actually so beautiful, like back to what you first said, just at one point I had a lot of resentment towards, not just my kids, but those years, hard years where there was a lot of addiction and hurtful behaviors, broken relationships. And now I'm honestly can say, I love that it happened to each one of us because it changed us. And, it can become this beautiful thing in our life. And it shifted my view of God. It shifted my view of myself. I got kind of real. And it shifted my view of what it meant to parent. And, it just was very freeing. But one of the prayers that I prayed for real was like, Lord, could you restore my children to their right minds? It literally was my prayer. And I do think that that is a step of freedom. Like, please restore me to my right mind. And God does that, doesn't he?
The word repent is widely misunderstood. The word repent in the original language just actually means a change of mind.
Right.
Just change your mind. Now, I need help changing my mind. So that's why I rely on grace for that, first and foremost. And, I love what you said about, similar, it's because it's similar to my own experience, right? That you come to go, oh, now that I'm on the other side of this, I can see the beauty in it. But during it, it's all but impossible to see. That's just something you're holding on to by faith, right? That this is going to be useful and meaningful in some way. Because at the time, it doesn't feel that way. It feels pretty icky,
Yeah.
But here we are, and stronger than ever, really.
Well, the third step is really about surrender, which we kind of all hate to admit. We need to throw up the white flag, so to speak. But what does that practically look like? This isn't just an idea. It's actually an action, isn't it? It's a step of action to surrender. Talk to us about what that looks like.
Yeah, the third step is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And it's not just a one-time act, right? Like, I got to do the third step every single day. In fact, I start the day with what's called the third step prayer. And I say this prayer literally the moment I open my eyes in the morning, in bed. And the prayer goes like this: God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Help me to overcome my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. That sort of encapsulates what step 3 is about, right? It's like, you know what? I am no longer the director of this show. I'm no longer the star actor. I'm no longer the producer. I'm no longer the screenwriter. It's, if God wants me to be an extra in this show, that's going to be fine with me,
Yeah.
So it is this turning of the will and the life over to the care of God. And you can call that conversion, but I don't really think that word really captures it in its entirety, because it's not a one-time deal. As I said, I say this prayer every morning, right? I get up every morning and I'm like, I got to start over, right? Like, here I am, I'm yours. Do with me as thou wilt, and help me to be an instrument of your peace in the world today.
Yeah. Yeah. What I hear when you say that, and it's true, it's an ongoing thing. It's like getting yourself off, if we want to use the image of the throne in your life, getting the ego, letting go of the ego, which I know the Enneagram deals with all that, helps you understand that better. But just like, let God be God. And I can tell you, Ian, one time when I was like praying for my kids and crying out to God, because I knew that it was definitely beyond my control to fix or change anybody else but me. I had this image that I believe, it was so powerful. I know it was God speaking to me, and it was very gentle, but he's like, Lorie, could you get out of the way? Excuse me, but could you just like get out of the way? Yeah. Because like you're in the direct line of sight. I would like to go after your kids, but you're like blocking the way with all my need to be God, to be the savior, to fix other people, to change the thing that was causing me so much pain. I mean, that was such a wake up call. It's just embedded in my mind when, can I let go and let God would I entrust the care of my children to God? And Ian, I'm telling you, it transformed how I operated in that time, and hopefully continue to, trusting, just constantly letting go of fixing other people. Why is it that we have this need to be the fixer, to be the one who goes after, why is it that we have to remind ourselves every day, God, okay, I'm going to let you be in charge today?
I mean, listen, this goes back to the Garden of Eden, right? And in fact, if anyone here doesn't think they have an addiction, I'm always like, okay, well, how about your addiction to playing God? How about your addiction to controlling people, places, and things in ways that are manipulative and calculated and strategic, both subtle and not so subtle, right? If people just live in that zone all the ding-dang time. Right? Yeah. And if you don't want to put that in where the blank is in that first step, just put the word sin in. Like, we admitted we were powerless over sin, that our lives have become unmanageable. How's that? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
Or I was talking to a guy yesterday, and the word he puts in there is anger. He has such an addiction to anger. Right. And he's like, I just had to say to God, I'm out of ammo here. Like, I admit that I am powerless over anger, my addiction to anger, and it's making my life unmanageable. So again, fixes take lots of different forms, right? Yeah. Or it could be, I'm addicted to my being a procrastinator and passive and not taking hold of my life, and it's making my life unmanageable. I mean, the list is endless of the things that we could put in there and get help for by using the 12 steps. And I think that, it's just part of human nature. We get scared, and when we get scared, we try to take the reins. And then when we take the reins, bad things happen, which make us more scared. And then what do? We redouble our efforts. We start doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And it doesn't happen. And on the note of kids, my years ago when we were in the throes of stuff with my son, a person in this group called Al-Anon, which is for parents or it could be spouses or anyone in a relationship with someone who has an addiction, said to us, he said, just remember, your son is God's kid first, not yours. And I remember crying, like literally crying. I was like, oh yeah, he's God's kid first, not mine. Like, he was entrusted to me, but he's God's kid first. So I've got to let God be in charge first here with him. And that was very freeing. That was an aha moment for me.
You know what? My husband and I had the same aha moment, Ian. That God loved our kids more than we're capable of. That he was the one who was going to go after them better than we ever could. like they belong to him. And that was a definite aha moment. And maybe somebody listening today is like, they're there. They want to fix somebody else in their life, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? You can trust God with his kids. He's going to go after them. You know, so many things we could talk about. I want to come back to this, like that man that talked about anger being his thing. In step 4, it includes this resentment inventory.
Yes.
Okay. Like, what is it and why is this so important?
Yeah. So step 4 is, it says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So remember, step 1 to 3, about mending and deepening your relationship with God. Now we're into mending and deepening our relationship with ourselves in 4 through 7. First step is this inventory. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our gaze inward, and we're going to start to do a little inventory, which is like going through your stuff and trying to figure out what you need to keep because it's still really great, and what needs to be thrown out. One of the things that we've learned in the 12-step world is just how much resentment plays into our addictions. And if I ask you to sit down, this happens constantly to me. Someone will say, I don't have that many resentments. I said, you ever sat down and tried to write them out? Go back to the earliest memory till today and write down all the people you still carry a grudge against. And the list is long. It can be 15, 20, 30, 40, more people, right? And then I tell them, your grudge, you're writing down resentments, not just about people, but maybe it's toward an institution. Maybe it's toward a system. Maybe it's, a public figure, right? Or a political figure, or whoever. Just write down everybody you're kind of mad at, even a little. The list is long. And what people don't realize is that those resentments are like poison. And to continue to feel in the present moment the slight that could have happened 20 years ago, 5 years ago, 40 years ago. To get that stuff off your chest is a great spiritual freedom.
Yeah.
And remember, in step 5, you're going to go share this with somebody else. So, you're going to be getting a lot of stuff out. And it's so beautiful when you share this stuff with people, and what comes back to you is compassion and understanding. Yeah. It's very beautiful.
Tell me about forgiveness and the power of it. What is forgiveness?
Man, where do we start? Maybe the simplest way to put it is it's forgiveness is equivalent to letting people out of the penalty box that we keep them in. Yeah. It's about issuing a pardon, which isn't to say that when you issue a pardon, it doesn't mean you're saying that a crime wasn't committed. A crime was committed, right? But you're issuing a pardon, right? And it is to no longer expect payment in the form of an apology, money, taking you back in, whatever payment you've set down as being required, right? You're saying, nope, no payment. I'm done demanding payment. I'm issuing a pardon. You're out of the penalty box. I don't want to live with anybody in my penalty box. God has made it clear to me that I shouldn't have people in my penalty box, and so therefore I'm going to try and keep it clear. Which, by the way, is what step 10 is about. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. We own our wrong when relationships go sideways, and the 12 steps are very much about if you've been forgiven, you need to forgive, and that's pretty clear. And so I'm very careful to try and keep my side of the street clean. If I've got ruptured relationships with people, I try to get to it right away to fix it or to heal it. And I try not to have people in my penalty box.
Yeah. Oh, that is so helpful, Ian, because I think sometimes we can feel overwhelmed by the hurts and the hangups and the heartaches that we carry. And forgiveness actually sets us free, doesn't it? It doesn't necessarily fix anything. It doesn't change the person. It might not remove, and the person may not resolve what has happened, but it does set us free. Yeah.
It's important to remember that, sometimes it takes feelings longer. You can forgive someone and still feel the pain of it, the hurt of it. I think sometimes when people say, I want to forgive them, what they really want is symptom relief. I don't want to feel this in my body anymore. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, you can forgive, and it may take a minute for the feelings to follow you to that place. But get to work, Like, I forgave my dad years ago. But I can remember that it took a long time for my feelings to catch up with the fact of my forgiving him.
Yeah.
That's
good.
And that's just part of the
really
journey.
Good.
I mean, seriously, the spiritual transformation is no quick deal. It takes a minute.
And it takes not doing it alone. And what I see in the value of your book, The Fix, and I also have in front of me the workbook. Why did you do the workbook? Why is this not about you just sitting at home on your couch and reading a book? Because so much of this, as models the 12 steps, is about community. What's the power in that?
Well, I have a mantra, and it goes like this. We get sick alone, and we get well together.
Wow.
I just think that's just a fundamental, universal spiritual truth. We get sick alone, we get well together. And one of the parts of the genius of groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous is that when you do this work in community, it accelerates and deepens it, right? And I don't entirely know what the magic of that secret sauce is. All I know is that it's true. So the workbook was designed where you could do this yourself, and if that's how you got to do it anyway, right? I'm not going to stop you. But if you had a group of 4 or 5 friends that got the workbook and sat down and did this together, it would be even more wonderful, right? Because you would have this shared experience. It's so important, Lorie. Look at the conversation we've had today, you and I. We've spoken about our children. We've spoken deeply. We don't know each other very well at all. And yet here we are talking about our experience. We've had our own little kind of meeting here. Yeah. And in that meeting, we've realized a lot of things, actually. Number one, we're not alone, right? I'm not the only person. Look, Lorie too, right? And in that, people don't understand what's happening, even neurologically. There is tremendous healing that takes place in the context of relationships. And even brand new ones. And so community, doing it together with safe people is like just part of the joy of it. It's just powerful.
When we were first going through our rough years, and when I say years, I mean years, okay? Mm-hmm. 7 years, 3 kids. And I tell our whole story, but the first part, I didn't want to tell anybody. I mean, who wants to air their dirty laundry, as we say? I mean, you just want to self-protect, and you're not sure. It appeared to me that everyone's family was doing just fine, but we were the screwed up ones, right? Well, it's interesting, as we started sharing our story in the middle of the mess, by the way, not when, everything appeared to be fixed or worked out, which we know is ongoing, but we definitely saw supernatural work in each one of our kids' lives, and we give God the credit for that. It was in the middle of the mess we shared our story, and to this day, Ian, like thousands of people contact us all the time, like ask because we were willing to share our story.
Yeah.
And it helped us as much as it's helping others, and it's just this mutual thread that it just has not stopped. And I tell you, isolation is a terrible thing. I'm about to head out to speak in British Columbia this next weekend to a group of people. I'm sure it's in the beautiful north of Canada. Can't wait to go there. But the number one thing I'm going to talk about is I not only tell our story, but teach on spiritual warfare and identity and the freedom there is in Christ and all these great biblical truths. I'm going to tell them my story. And I'm going to say, like, we all have our story, right? And this is our connecting piece.
Yes. Bunches of people have said to me, this book is really vulnerable. And I sometimes when they say it to me, they say it in such a way, it's almost like they're saying, "Are you crazy?" And I was like, another mantra of mine, your mess is the message.
Yes.
Right? I know
Me
it's
too.
pithy.
That's my mantra.
It's a little, right? Your mess is the message. And it's the place of, I have another friend of mine, he's a therapist, pal, and he says, and I've never forgotten, he said, Ian, always lead with your weakness. And so when you stand up to tell that story, you're leading with weakness. Yeah. You're not getting up there and doing the happy, clappy Christian woman thing where it's like, just victory in Christ. It's like, no, let me just tell you about the down and out. Yeah. Let me tell you. Let me just tell you what the truth is. And when you do that, you're going to give all those people in that room a permission to have the lives that they actually have, and to have them out loud, so that they don't feel alone, right? Because as you said, isolation is just toxic. It's toxic. Yeah. We need to co-journey with other people, or we are placing ourselves in a very dangerously vulnerable situation.
Well, we could talk a while. You're going to have to come back, Ian, because there's more. There's 12 steps. We've only talked through maybe 4 or 5 of them. You know what? Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Here's what I want to encourage people to do. Get the fix. You need it. Don't be thinking about everybody else in your life. I'll fix them with the fix. Even if that's your motivation, get the book, right? And what is your greatest, just your desire as people get this book, Ian? What's your biggest hope as people get it?
I think my greatest hope is just that people would experience the kind of healing I've experienced, and the kind of joy, and the kind of, one sort of eye-opening experience after another I've had as I've walked this path. I want them to know that it's a wonderful gospel, consistent message that you can organize your spiritual and personal life around, and know that you are in the flow of God's will and design for your life. And I think if they know that, then I've had a good day.
I would totally agree. I think you could use this as your devotional guide. I think you could use it as your group discussion guide. I think you could use it as your, individual reflection time. I thank you for writing it. I think for many, the 12 steps were not accessible. At least they were perceived as not accessible. Like somehow the rest of us didn't qualify to go to the meeting. Mm-hmm. But now you've made it so accessible. And I believe that what you've done here is taken the gospel in a beautiful light. You've walked people through, which is the gospel, that we are desperate in need of help, that there is hope, and actually there's a healer, and his name is Jesus. And you and I have both personally experienced that. When you find God in his truest, who God really is to you and how he sees you, you find yourself, right? You find yourself in a much more clear way. Any final thoughts, Ian, as we wrap up today?
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. People can learn more about me at my website, Ian Morgan Cron, CRON.com. And while they're there, they can learn about what we call the Typology Institute Enneagram Assessment. It's a new product that we spent a fortune and 2 years having developed so that people could learn their Enneagram type and a bunch of other things about themselves. And that's there. And I've just had such a delightful time hanging out with you. Thanks.
Yeah, me too, Ian. Thank you so much. I'm going to see you again. And thank you for joining us on the Found podcast today. It was rich, and it was personal, and I just can't thank you enough for taking the time. Those viewers, those ones listening, and Ian, thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Found podcast. I hope you're feeling encouraged and excited to step into everything God has for you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And if today's show encouraged you, please share it with friends and give us a shout out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.